It's like pushing the gas pedal and nothing goes.
By John.
It's different having Jason there.
One, two, three.
Just before John's office, you turn to the right.
That was our fault.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely send that to you.
Send that to me?
Yes.
I'll leave it to you. Just send me the one line.
It's at the start of the meeting
Meeting
that we
viewer.
remind
I've got you
people
covered.
of future dates of things, right?
Ready? I don't think I see. Hillary, is there a Red Cross representative here? Do we have a Red Cross representative? Okay.
And then Pam.
Yeah, I read those. Okay. Is staff ready? Council ready? I'm going to call today's regular town council meeting to order. It is 3:01 and it is March 5th. So with that, can we get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Reeves? Here. Councilmember McKee Cant?
Here.
Councilmember Knight?
Here.
Vice Mayor Tripp? Here. Mayor Moeller?
Here. Thank you. If we could all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry. Cheer.
Thank you, everybody. And with that, I would like to call for a motion for the council to adopt today's agenda.
I move to adopt today's agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by McKee Cant and a second by Knight. We're going to roll call vote. You want us to hit buttons?
Roll call for this.
Okay.
Councilmember Reeves? Yes. Councilmember McKee Cant?
Yes.
Councilmember Knight?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tripp? Yes. Mayor Moeller?
Yes. So with that, we are on to council member announcements. And you can hit your red button and I'll call on you. And before they get hit, I guess just one thing I want to bring up is that this week, on Wednesday, we are starting what we are calling First Wednesdays. And this will be our inaugural event. It will be, everybody is welcome. It's going to be in the little outdoor kitchen area behind the Heritage Room in the community center. And for our inaugural event, our fire guys from Station 12 will be grilling up some goodies, and you will also have an opportunity to learn about CPR with a hands-on demonstration. And Councilmember McKee Cant.
Thank you. While we're talking about our Fire Station 12 and CPR, please put on your calendar Saturday, April 13th for the first of our emergency preparedness workshops. This one is called Until Help Arrives. I see a lot of new faces out there that haven't attended emergency workshops last year, not pointing anybody out, but I think it's on all of us to communicate with our neighbors. Until Help Arrives will be an important topic for our community and resiliency, so I hope people will show up. Thank you.
And one other announcement, I just wanted to mention that the town manager and I, last Friday, this is also an annual event, attended the Leadership Napa Valley Government Day. And so Leadership Napa Valley has been going on for more than 20 years, and they've had a great enthusiastic class this year. And so we all divided amongst ourselves with different tables. So we had the Yountville table, and we had 5 Leadership Napa Valley students who were charged with asking questions about Yountville and then reporting out, and so with all the other municipalities as well as the county. So it was a lot of fun. They did a great job. So it's something that's always kind of fun to do. And everybody was amazingly informed and just great students. So with that, we have one proclamation for the, it is American Red Cross Month. And so do we have somebody who's going to, great, come to the podium. I'll meet you there. Speak into the mic so they can kind of hear us. I don't have your name.
My name is Tony Lent.
Hi, Tony Lent. How are you? Welcome. This is a proclamation in recognition of American Red Cross Month. Whereas during American Red Cross Month in March, we recognize the compassion of people in the town of Yountville and reaffirm our commitment to care for one another in times of crisis. And whereas this generous spirit is woven into the fabric of our community and advances the humanitarian legacy of American Red Cross founder Clara Barton, one of the most honored women in our country's history, who notably dedicated herself to alleviating suffering. And whereas today, kind-hearted individuals in our community exemplify Barton's commitment as they step up through the Red Cross in the Northern California coastal region to provide a beacon of hope for our neighbors in need. Through their voluntary and selfless contributions, they make a life-saving difference in people's darkest hours. Whether it's delivering shelter, food, and comfort during disasters, providing critical blood donations for hospital patients, supporting military families, veterans, and caregivers through the unique challenges of service, saving lives with first aid, CPR, and other skills, or delivering aid and reconnecting loved ones separated by global crises. And whereas we hereby recognize this month of March in honor of all those who lead with their hearts to serve people in need, and we ask everyone to join in this commitment to strengthen our community. Now, therefore, let it be resolved, I, Margie Moeller, Mayor of the Town of Yountville, State of California, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the laws of Napa County in California, do hereby proclaim March 2024 as Red Cross Month. I encourage all citizens of the town of Yountville to reach out and support this humanitarian mission. Thank you very much, Tony. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you.
So, thank you all. I wanted to thank the town of Yountville for honoring us once again with this proclamation. As far as I know, this is my second year receiving one, so thank you guys again. And for supporting the Red Cross as we try to support you. All that I would ask is that we have an open house on the 28th of March in Napa at the Arts Center that is right next to Kaiser Permanente and the post office. We will have that open house from 4 to 7, and we'd like to see you all there. And if anyone would like to donate blood, we have American RedCrossBlood.org, and you can sign up there to be at a blood draw. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Okay, next up is public comment. This is public comment that is not on anything that is not on today's agenda. If you'd like to come up to the microphone. See no one coming up. Okay, great. Let's move on to the consent calendar. We have 5 items on the consent. Can I get a motion from the council and a second for approving the consent calendar?
I move approval of the consent calendar, items 8A through 8E.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Knight and a second by Tripp to approve today's consent calendar. Hillary, you want us to hit the buttons, or are you going to roll
Please
call?
use the voting system.
Okay. Everybody can see how we voted. There it is on the screen. Oh, it went by really quick. Maybe we'll do that one more time.
We're doing it again. Mine is still on.
I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Reeves, Councilmember McKee Cant,
Yes.
Councilmember Knight,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tripp,
Yes.
Mayor Moeller.
Yes, so we've just approved today's consent calendar. The next item, we have a guest presentation from our representative on the Napa County Abatement District annual update. So if people haven't noticed on their property tax bills, we all pay assessment for this great work that they all do.
Mayor, just one moment. I'm sorry, real quickly. I just wanted to note, I know there's some residents in the audience today, and on the consent calendar, what we did approve was on 8C was the resolution approving the, I guess that's the vacating of the easements on Mesa Court, and that was approved during consent calendar. Thank you.
Yes, Wes.
Okay,
Please.
my name is Wes Maffei. I'm the director of the Napa County Mosquito Abatement District. I have been with the district for almost 27 years. I have 36 years in mosquito control. The district was formed in 1925. Its primary focus is to try and minimize mosquito populations. We cannot get rid of every single one of them, but you can reduce the numbers to a tolerable level. That said, there still are issues that we're facing. First is the best way that citizens can help us is by managing the water in and around their home. No water, no mosquitoes. Real simple formula. Any type of container, gutters, sumps, drains, all of these things can hold water, even plant saucers that can breed mosquitoes. Second issue is there are species of mosquitoes that are non-native that have been introduced to California. They are spreading throughout the state. They are present in Solano County. They're present in Contra Costa County, the Central Valley, and throughout Southern California. One of these is the yellow fever mosquito, Aedes aegypti. The other one is the Asian tiger mosquito, Aedes albopictus. Both of them are excellent vectors of disease, including some very nasty diseases. California, for the first time in its history, recorded 2 cases of endemic dengue virus in Southern California, and this is now a very, very big deal. It is a disease that is excruciatingly painful, and it will last for a few weeks, and the recovery is slow. So it is not something you want to have happen. We have the other types of mosquito-borne diseases, the encephalitides, the West Nile virus, even malaria, which from time to time still shows up. And so these are all important. So as a district, we typically take care of the swamps and the roadside ditches and all of the different wastewater ponds that are associated with wineries and other types of facilities and even irrigation ponds. That's our primary focus. That doesn't mean that we still won't answer service calls or requests for service when somebody says, oh my gosh, the mosquitoes are so bad they carry me away. We'll come out and we'll take care of that. We try to do it in a method that is non-toxic, so we either use a bacteria or an insect growth hormone that is specific to mosquitoes. It does not affect other insects, and it definitely does not affect wildlife. That said, the most effective method is managing the water. So if folks turn over those containers or the old wading pools or Uncle Bob's cement sink that's been gathering water and garbage in the backyard for eons, all of these things will produce mosquitoes. If they are drained, if they are turned over, you help us out a lot because we cannot get into people's backyards. Now, way back in the day, which I remember, going in and out of yards wasn't a big deal. People didn't get all uptight. It was a lot easier. Now it's very, very difficult. So we depend on word of mouth. We depend on folks to manage the water in and around their home. We'll take care of the other stuff. We rarely adulticide. It's not something that we like doing because it does have potential to impact other organisms, and we want to try and minimize those types of impacts. So it's technically friendly mosquito control as best as we can do. Another service that we have is yellow jackets. Folks locate a yellow jacket nest that is in the ground, we will come treat it, and we treat it with a pyrethrin dust, so again, it does not affect wildlife. That said, if it's a nest that's in or on a structure, we're not licensed for that. That's private pest control. And it's a big distinction, but it's very important, and the state of California enforces that strictly. But if it's a nest in the ground, we're on it, we'll take care of it. We're happy to do that, and we do every year we do a dozen, 2 dozen nests just here in the town of Yountville. Sometimes in the park, sometimes in somebody's yard. Beard Ditch is a famous place. There's always 3 or 4 of them there every year. So we have a number of places that we do this. And usually it's folks either from Public Works or parks that call us and say, oh, my God, we're trying to trim the plants and we can't get in. So these are the types of things that we do for you. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Well, thank you very much. And first question, it's really something maybe you could elaborate a little more on. I know it's mosquito abatement is the name, but I found that actually you guys do a lot more than that. Sometimes if there's other predatory bugs going around, like wasp and stuff, you'll come out. Can you kind of speak a little bit to?
There are other things that we do. Most of it's informational, but folks have some strange thing crawling around in the yard or in the house. We'll identify it. We're happy to do that. If there are other species of wasps, normally we don't control those primarily because their nests tend to be in walls or on structures for which we're not licensed, but we can still provide advice, and we will do that, and we'll identify it. And many times a lot of homeowners do want to take care of it themselves, and they've got different methods, but we will say these things will work, these things don't work. We provide information on ticks, we provide information on tick-borne diseases, and we will provide information and come out and do inspections concerning rodents. So if somebody has rats or mice, we can do an inspection and say, yes, they're getting in here. This is what you can do to exclude them from inside your house. And oh, by the way, if you're going to engage in control and not hire a pest control service, here are the things that you can do that are safe. And so we do provide that type of information.
So I'll take a couple more questions from council members, but just one last question from me. So if there's one take-home message you'd like to send out to the residents of Yountville today, what would it be?
First one I started with, you manage the water in and around your home, you make a big difference, not only for yourself, but for your neighbors. Mosquitoes do not recognize boundaries, and they will fly anywhere that there is a free meal and a free place to stay protected. So manage that water, dump those containers. If you're not sure, give us a call. We'll come out and we can obviously provide additional advice.
Okay, thank you. So with that, Vice Mayor Tripp.
Thank you for your good service to the community. Many people have mentioned they appreciate the help with the Yellow Jackets. My question is, because Hopper Creek is always in the front of many of our minds, and of course now it's flowing very quickly. But in the summer, there are areas, I live along it, where the water gets quite stagnant. So I was just interested, do you routinely monitor some of those pools that end up kind of sticking around through the summer? That's my main question. Do you come through and monitor them?
Yes, we do. In fact, we have a fellow that has worked this area for the last 20 years. So he knows it very, very well. Very nice guy, very friendly. And Hopper Creek, Beard Ditch, there's a couple of places up at the vet's home. I mean, there's a number of areas that we have on our regular inventory that receive routine surveillance. It doesn't always mean that we're going to treat it. Unless there's actual breeding activity, there's no reason to do a treatment. That said, we also have thresholds. So if there's just 1 or 2 mosquitoes, we're not going to go crazy, but we will watch it very closely. And that's, again, because you want to minimize any potential impact to non-target organisms.
And a final question on the non-toxic, and maybe the right word isn't biologic, but where you're killing the mosquitoes without using a pesticide. Are those at all harmful to dogs who might be drinking out of the water, or children, or anything like that?
The BTI bacterium and the methoprene, no. It's not harmful to children, birds, dogs, frogs, and that's one of the reasons we use it. It's also far, far more expensive than some of the traditional materials. That said, we have been using only those types of materials now close to 30 years. So that's our primary focus. Our first message is getting the word out. If you manage the water, we don't even have to do that, which is really nice. That said, something always escapes, or somebody forgets about whatever it is. And so then we'll take care of it. There is some work that we do in the storm drain system because some of them hold water in the summer and they breed mosquitoes. And so we routinely treat those as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember McKee Kent.
Thank you. It's a matter of education. With cold evening temperatures, do mosquitoes continue to breed through the winter? And I ask because we have buckets. Of course, after going through the drought the last few years, it's like, yay, catch all the rain you can. But we had that brief bump up in temperatures recently, and I noticed mosquitoes already in them, so I got the dunkers out. But I always kind of thought winter wasn't a breeding season.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
So California, unlike most states, is exceptionally blessed. And what that means is here in Napa County, even though the temperatures might get down into the 20s, we have mosquitoes that are specifically adapted to the winter months.
Thank you.
And then you have others that are adapted to the summer. And so it's nonstop for us. So it's not like the East Coast or the Midwest where when the snows fall, you're done for a few months. You get a break. No, not the case here. And so that does make it a little difficult. And so part of the message that the mayor asked about, I would amend, because you reminded me of something that's absolutely critical. A lot of folks save rainwater. Very good thing. Recycling gray water, wonderful. The problem is they don't tightly cover the containers. They don't screen them. And so now we have mosquito villas all over the community. And so it's been a real problem for us.
And
So
how long does it take them to go from a larvae stage to a bug?
in the summer months, we can do it in 7 days. In the winter months, depending on the species, you're talking maybe 2 weeks, although there are some species in the marshes, the tide marshes, that are adapted. They will hatch, the eggs hatch in the fall with the fall rains. The immature stages will develop, and then right about the last week of February, first week of March, they emerge as adults. And so you have some that are long-lived. Then the adults will hang around those marsh species for about 2 months. The ones that breed in the summer, they live 2 or 3 weeks, they're dead. Problem is, we did a little experiment with those wine barrels. You buy those half wine barrels that are so cool, and you do water gardens with them. I did an experiment with one the first year I was here, and we set one out, and in the course of 3 months, I collected over 27,000 mosquitoes out of that barrel.
Okay.
So it does not take much to create joy.
Thank you.
So that's all the questions we have. Thanks again, Will, for coming. I always like these conversations as a scientist. Some of my early work was on Bacillus thuringiensis, so I really like hearing about BT, and still out there, still hasn't gotten any cheaper. But
No,
anyway.
it hasn't. Well, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm itching now. Just like,
And now our next item is public hearings. We have no public hearings for this evening, so we'll move on to our administrative items. We have 4, and the first one we are going to discuss the California Public Utilities Commission, who are being petitioned by AT&T to eliminate landlines. So, Town Manager, you're going to take this report for us?
Sure. Thank you. The staff report, in essence, is asking for approval of a letter that was drafted. The mayor and I worked together on a letter, and you may have read about this issue, and I think the mayor has been following this closely. As I understand it, the CPUC will hold hearings on this next week, I think they begin, or March 19th.
There'll be a Zoom meeting on the 19th, and I think they'll be closing the public comment.
Yeah, so we're in the public comment phase. Their hearings will be held. So, most appropriate approach would be for, again, the council to approve this letter. The mayor can then participate, obviously advocating for what is written in the letter. And happy to try to answer any questions, but just looking for your direction on this.
And I might add a little. So when I started reading about this, I had great concern, and I put some of that in my letter. I think I'll just read that. I was getting ready just to send a public comment in with what I prepared, but then I thought it might be more effective actually putting it on Town of Yountville letterhead. And since we really hadn't been an agendized item, I kind of just spoke from the first person. So I'll just kind of read it real quick for everyone in the audience. So it is addressed to the California Public Utilities Commission. AT&T landlines are vital for the safety of our residents in the town of Yountville, and I, as the mayor, assert that they must continue to be available. The reliance on landlines during emergencies is a critical aspect of community preparedness. When power outages strike and internet connectivity falters, landlines remain steadfast. They become a lifeline for residents to reach out to emergency services, families, and neighbors. My top priority is to ensure the safety of our residents, and over the past 10 years, Yountville has faced various life-threatening situations such as earthquakes, fires, power outages, and storms. During these emergencies, power outages continue for days. Internet and cell phone services are unreliable, and landlines were our only reliable form of communication. In our community of more than 3,000 residents, most are senior citizens, including 650 senior veterans residing at the California Veterans Home Yountville, who depend on landlines as cell service is not reliable in the area. Landlines serve as an essential public service and are indispensable for our community during emergencies. As the mayor, I rely on my 2 home landlines for my disaster management efforts, and I open my home to residents during emergency events to use my landline phone lines. Landlines are the bridge to connect with their worried friends, neighbors, and emergency services. While technological advances are essential, they are not always reliable in our rural area. We must balance progress with the need of our vulnerable populations. I trust that the Utilities Commission will oppose approving AT&T's request to discontinue their landline business, and I urge the Commission to consider the safety of our residents and ensure that landlines continue to be available in the town of Yountville. So with that, let's go to any questions that the council members have. Councilmember Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you writing the letter. I think it's an excellent letter. I was just in reading through it, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to bring it to the council to review and also to support it. And I was just would like to maybe suggest 2 friendly amendments to it that in the beginning of your second paragraph, you talked about my top priorities, and with us approving this, I think it's important for the PUC to know the whole council supports this letter. As I would suggest maybe instead of my top priority, saying the Yountville Town Council's top priority. And then the very last sentence that I think is you're reminding them of the importance to consider the safety of residents, that instead of saying I urge the commission, I would maybe recommend language like as Yountville Mayor and with the unanimous support of the Yountville Town Council, we urge the commission to take this action. And so I appreciate your letter and writing the letter. I'm just I'm suggesting 2 friendly amendments to the letter to broaden it so that they know, as you always do, speak for the council and the community, but that the whole council supports this, the intent of your letter.
Okay, so I'll take further questions. We'll go to the public, and then we'll come back and deliberate.
Thank you.
That's okay. Councilmember McKee-Kent.
I want to thank Councilmember Knight for covering one of the questions that I had. The other one was whether or not we could include verbiage forcing AT&T to remain in business and offering this service is one thing. I'm starting to hear concerns about price gouging, so I don't know if that is something that we could add and say what we expect that the commission also keep an eye on that. I think utilities in people's homes are getting squeezed from one end to the other, and I'd like to make sure that they don't force their hand.
Vice Mayor Tripp.
I totally agree with the thrust of the letter. I used to spend a lot of time in a remote part of the North Coast, and the landline was the only way you could really get to emergency services if you had an emergency. So it's hard to imagine they could really do this. And I also agree with what Robin said, that it might be worth adding a line in there. They used to have, and I think they still do, a lifeline service, which is very reasonable for people who, are of more limited income. And I could see that would be one reaction they'll have. The reason they want to get rid of it, of course, is it's not economic to maintain all these lines. And then I do think it would be nice, since, and I read Brad nicely quoted our new handbook, we can all send personal letters, and I think some of us probably have personally commented on this issue. But this letter, I think the intent is to represent the council and the town. So I would actually like to agree with what what Eric said, but also in general, perhaps take out the I statements and just make it more generic in the sense that it is from the council and from the town. But I really liked all the parts about representing residents who are, and I think we could actually say, because it's true, 50% of our residents are over 65. So we are in a community where people do have emergencies. So that would be my comments.
Councilmember Reeves.
I agree with all of the statements. I think I have already sent a letter as an individual to the CPUC, and I would love for this letter to be reflective of a town position, so that it comes from the council through the mayor. It is fine with me, but reflecting that the council is unanimously supporting it, I would think would lend it more force, and also a strong position from our town and our residents. So I would like to see the recommendations of Councilmember Knight reflected in the letter, and and the addition of the affordability factor as well.
Okay, so before we deliberate, do we have any public who would like to comment on AT&T's request to eliminate landlines? Permission from the CPUC. Come on up.
I'm Ashley Tencher at 6740 Jefferson. Spent my day in Napa doing tax returns for the AARP, and many members of our community attend, and heard from two separate people today that live in Yountville unsolicited that they're worried about this issue. So I just want to support that this is broadly needed and comes up. It's a worry, and it's keeping people up more than their taxes.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else who would like to come up and comment on this item? Well, not seeing anybody, we'll bring it back to council for a motion and recommendations.
Okay, do I need to?
Councilmember McKee-Kent.
I move that we move forward and approve this letter with the recommendations made by Vice Mayor Knight and just a few slight edits.
If we're going to have this letter come from staff, I think staff might want more direction. Is that?
I think I understood Councilmember Knight's comments, so I think we can include that in the letter. I didn't hear anything in the motion about any price gouging or affordability. I don't know if that's part of the motion or what.
It should include it if the rest of the council feels like that could be an issue.
So some reference to maintaining affordable service
And
in
consistent,
essence.
yeah.
I do think, okay.
Thank you.
I think we can, if you're comfortable with that, Mayor, then I think I can redraft the letter for your signature.
Well, we'll see if, I've read, there's over 5,000 letters right now. I think, we could probably, I don't know if we really need to put that. I know we all agree with that, but I think right now I just want to maintain these landlines. I'm not going to, I know I pay quite a bit for my two landlines, and so it is, but I'm kind of thinking if we just really kind of stay focused on this is coming from the council, and we really need to keep these. I'm kind of wanting to fight one battle at a time as strong as I can. But
if they force prices up, people will have no choice if they're making choices on budgetary restraints.
and if we can put something in that's factual, and I'm not sure I have that information, but maybe if the town can find that information about
Their last increase, I've seen that it recently went up to 70 for a few households. So maybe we can find out when their last increase was.
if we can find something very factually based to put in, I think then that would be strong.
Quick little sentence in there. I understand you want to fight one battle.
Yeah,
with
so
strength.
that I would be fine with that. So we have a motion. Let's get a second, and then we can take the rest of the questions. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
The vote is now open.
Okay. Well, I had
We have a
a
discussion.
council member Knight, I think, had.
Mayor, thank you. I just, to be fair, I reached out to the mayor this morning, and the two language my two friendly amendment suggestions I sent this morning to the mayor and CC'd the town manager and the acting town clerk, so you have the language that's specifically just what I meant. I said today, so I would encourage that language. So I think it's a very good letter, and I thank you for writing it. But I think emphasizing the unanimous support by the town council strengthens it. So thank you.
Councilmember Reeves.
Oh, I just wanted to comment on the economic aspect, because oftentimes the horse escapes the barn with price hikes, that it would be good to be preemptive if we can support that about the pricing, because once they raise the price, they never lower it. So it would be good to include that if that's an actual fear or an actual thing they're considering.
And, just as a discussion point, I support putting some of that in if we can find something important and factual. But I've kind of noticed once I really got involved in this, taking a real close look at my AT&T landline bill, and you really have to punch through several places on the website, but it's amazing all those little features that somebody calls, I just pick up the phone and calls them back. I thought, oh, isn't this really cool? Well, you pay $14.95 a month for that, and then so I found out that I had like 9 different really cool little features that I'm paying $15 a month for. So just to kind of resident beware, take a close look at that bill, because and then if you happen to drop it and think, oh, I really want to do it, it costs you $40 to get it back, so you can pay $15 a month. So the devil's in the details with some of the costs of these landlines. So with that, does staff have enough information from the council? There's the thumbs up, and now we can vote. Town clerk, would you like for us to vote? Okay.
The vote is open. And that passes unanimously.
All right, great. So off to fight a battle to save the landlines in Yountville. Thank you very much. Now we are moving on to administrative item B. I think we have a lot of people in the audience who came for this. We got here as quick as we could. We are going to get a staff report first, talking about approving a resolution and authorizing and directing execution of the purchase and sale of the Yountville Elementary School. With that, Town Manager, you're going to start us off?
I am.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as you see in the agenda, there's actually 2 staff reports. This is the first of 2 that will address the purchase and sale agreement related to the school site here behind me at 6554 Yount Street. It's approximately 6.83 acres. I know everyone in the town is very familiar with it. And just a quick history lesson in terms of the school was closed in 2020 by the district due to declining enrollment. The town and the district have been engaged in talks since that time, sort of off again, on again conversations. Prior to me starting in June of 23, there was a goal-setting workshop that the council had where you unanimously agreed that the school site was the highest priority. It was actually I think it was actually the only thing that got 5 votes at that time. And then more recently, in January of this year, we convened and we had our own goal-setting session, and that was reaffirmed by this council as one of the highest priorities in terms of how we prioritize sort of new initiatives. So obviously clear to staff that this is important, and we've been working hard to get to this point today. What's before you in this staff report is the approval of the purchase and sale agreement, which the key deal points are it's an $11 million purchase price, $100,000 deposit, which is refundable until we go complete the due diligence phase, which is 30 days unless extended. And that would be the official due diligence period. I would tell you unofficially, as we've been working through the negotiations, we have started due diligence and we've done a lot of work that has led us to this point, and working through a checklist and continuing to obviously make sure that we're inspecting the property and looking at the history of the property so that we can go into this transaction eyes wide open. Gary has worked with the district's counsel in terms of working all the legal terms, including the indemnity language, which I know he's prepared to discuss if there's any questions about. And then there are standard provisions in the agreement related to escrow closing and the transfer of ownership. The next item, Celia King, our Administrative Service Director, will work through the financial details. But generally speaking, the next item appropriates $11.5 million, the $11 million for the purchase price, $500,000 for what we're calling the initial costs, which would be in essence the cost to clean up the site and make it usable by the public. This would be mainly the exterior of the site. And then we've introduced the idea of the interim and then what I'm calling the idea phase. So we have the initial, the interim, and then the idea phase. And although we're not asking for a budget appropriation today, we are estimating roughly $500,000 for both of those phases. Interim would be how the community could use some of the existing buildings. Obviously we have to go in and make sure that they're usable and also look at a lot of things related to permitting, construction, et cetera. But we do feel that the buildings are in good condition and that there is opportunity for interim uses within the existing buildings. While we begin the process for outreach planning, design engineering for the long-range vision, or sort of the ideas of what could be ultimately built and used for the school site. The acquisition is being funded by specific savings for the purchase, general fund reserves, and Measure S funds designated for workforce and affordable housing. So approximately a third of the purchase price, a little less than that actually, is being used by Measure S funds. So really, as you look at the site, I would tell you the only initial constraint is that portion or proportion of the Measure S funds would need to be used for workforce and affordable housing as defined by Measure S. And we can get into that more into the future, but that would clearly be part of the idea phase or sort of the long-term visioning of the property. And we would, have I think the quote in the paper was robust outreach, which would mean regular updates and progress reports to the community, many opportunities for public input and engagement. And I think that starting with what I can announce today as would be March 26th, which is the fourth Tuesday of this month, that we would staff would host an open house over at the school site from, we're looking at 3 to 6, but once we confirm the details, and obviously we need access to the site, and I think the district is willing to do that, we'd like it to be in the multipurpose room at the school so that the community can come ask questions about the transaction. We can give updates on due diligence. Based on how the agreement is written, the soonest that we would close on the property would be mid-April. But obviously we have to work through all the due diligence items to get to that point. So we thought it was important prior to closing, or prior to the deposit really going non-refundable, that we give the community the opportunity to come and ask questions, and I will be there as other staff members will, so we can have more information at that time, especially since we'll be towards the end of the official due diligence period. So that concludes my report. Obviously, a lot of work ahead of us, but it is an important milestone for the community, and I'm happy to have worked with you to meet one of your highest priorities, and I think we will continue to do all of the important work that's going to be necessary to make this an asset for the community for a very long time.
All right. Thank you very much for that. So just to give you a little bit of information, I think how we can kind of structure the two discussions. The council will kind of ask questions of the staff regarding both of the reports. The purchase contract that we'll be discussing in a few minutes, as well as the use of the additional $1.5 million for the short-term kind of cleanup and taking a further look at the site and finishing all of our due diligence. So we'll go with council questions. And just so you know, we've had lots of discussion. If you've been watching our agendas closely, we've had lots of items on our agenda in closed session regarding this property. So we can't talk about those when we're in negotiations in the public, but now we have something that we can report out on and actually talk about. And also I wanted to add that I believe we'll be taking an action tonight for approval of this the contract, but then it goes to the school district, and I think it's going to be a week from
this Thursday. It's on their docket for Thursday.
So then they approve it, and then it's just like buying a house. Then we go into escrow and do all our instructions and do all the stuff and before it's sold. So it's a process, but we are making great strides. So with that, let's go. And then what I'm going to do, I'll go to the public. You can come up and ask any details you want about the sales price or the terms and what we plan on doing with the more details about the $1.5 million. We'll take note of all the questions after you come up, and then we can answer those once we've heard from everybody. Then the council will come back and we'll divide it into two. We'll go with the purchase price, and look for discussion and approval on that, and then the recommendation for the $1.5 million. So with that, council, questions of staff. Vice Mayor Tripp.
I just wanted to ask Brad, following up on what the mayor said, I think it's a really strong contract, and I'm most appreciative of all the work that you and Gary have done on it and all the input you took from all of us. My question is on the due diligence. Could you just expand a little bit? Because it's a little bit like a house. You make the offer, it gets accepted, and then you get to start, looking at things. What will be going on during the due diligence period, and what will be going on? It would be helpful, I think, because it's been something I know you've been working on, defining exactly what activities we need to do during that period.
Yeah, so there's a long checklist. I'll kind of give you some of the bigger points. One is what's referred to as an environmental assessment, or a phase one. Phase one will look at, we have hired a consultant, I should say, to do that work, where they'll come in and look at the history of the site and also do non-invasive inspections such that they can determine if there are any environmental issues that we should be concerned with. So that's one big item. The other items, really kind of, we have a construction management company that we have on call or under contract that is helping our public works staff do the inspection of, the roofs and the structures to make sure that, that the existing buildings are usable through the interim phase, so that, as we talk about what's possible, we want to make sure that we're not acquiring a money pit in terms of, the work that would need to be put in to utilize those buildings. Beyond that, there's a lot of legal items that need to be confirmed in terms of, title and, going through the title insurance process and making sure that the survey and the boundaries and all of those sorts of, what I'll call legal issues are being just vetted and making sure that obviously what we're proposing is what we're buying, and so there are no surprises. And as you all know, you've been using the analogy of buying a house. This all happens under this umbrella of escrow, where you're, in essence, under contract as long as both sides perform. And I think, I think that's the essence of it. And we are going through our due diligence checklist. The district will have a similar list. Obviously, it's different being a seller than a buyer, but I do think that we've been working well together and making sure what we're buying is in the condition that we agreed to. And so that is something we're talking to the district about as relates to what buildings are left, what condition the site is transferred in. So all of those are reflected in the due diligence period that, again, that we've already started unofficially, but would start officially if we opened escrow and would become more of a legal requirement versus something that we were doing to get us to this point today.
Do you anticipate doing any more in-depth or needing to do more in-depth environmental assessment beyond a phase one at this juncture?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to do some soils testing, and so I think that is a question of where and when and how long that would take. But I think that's important, especially as we're looking at, the idea phase and what's possible. So we're exploring the timing of that, but that would be the one thing. I think I feel like we've done enough work on the buildings. We still need to do some additional work to make sure, again, that the buildings are sound for interim uses. But I think the soils would be the one thing I would tell you that I think is typically part of a phase two report, that we would want to at least look at some soils sampling and make sure we know what. Both if there were any hazardous materials, but also generally kind of the construction issues that might come up as we consider the idea phase of the project.
Right, because certainly when we get to the idea phase, at least, my guess is, and you've actually been a redevelopment director, whoever might loan the money to build some sort of housing is going to want to be sure it's a good site and all that. So eventually we would probably end up getting there anyway. So now would probably be a good time to look at some of those issues. Yeah. And I know you and John Ferns have been really working hard on that. So it's, I guess I just think we need to, I'm super hopeful, but I think the due diligence is really important at this point, as I know you feel that as well.
Yes.
Councilmember Reeves.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure, are we doing at our expense a survey of the entire property to make sure that all the boundaries are established and known?
Well, I know there was a recent survey done. John, I don't know if we're contracting a new survey. I think we've talked about that, but I don't know if the research we've done on the existing is current enough.
The school district did a boundary survey within recent times at the same time that the town did a boundary survey for this property. Those surveys get recorded, so it's not so much important that we do our own survey as that we get a copy of the actual survey that they performed, which we've asked for and are expecting to receive.
Okay, that's great. And just a question on how will you report out on the progress of our due diligence for the community? Will it come through reports to the council, or will we send out separate announcements, or how will that work?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that, I'm fine sort of making this checklist available so people understand kind of all of the different things we're working through. Clearly, if anything creates a yellow or red flag, I would come back to council and see how you want to deal with it. I mean, if there's a true sort of fatal flaw or dark red flag, then I would probably advise that we would cancel the transaction. And I think those are where I guess how we do that really would depend on what we found. And I think if everything is sort of yellow flags and we're talking about, sort of general risk, then that would probably be something that I would, I'm happy to, again, share the list and talk it through. But, what you're authorizing this evening, if you approve the resolution, is for us to execute the transaction. So, I'm not going to do that blindly or without, obviously sharing information with the community. But I also think it just really depends. And to this date, we haven't found anything that, to me, would be even perceived as a yellow flag. And we have at least, general understanding of the history of the site and so on and so forth. And also, between me and the other experienced people that are both internal and external, we generally know what we're looking for. These are not like, these are these are things that are part of all due diligence. And when you look at schools have their own issues. But I think, again, I think the district is being very transparent, sharing all the documents that they can with us. So we'll make sure that we're keeping the community informed, and obviously that starts with the five of you.
So based on that, can you make a comment real quick, because we've gotten some information about the history of the site. I think it might be interesting just for people to kind of hear.
Yeah, well, I think like most things around here, it was a farm. It was a farm before it was a school, and I think, as you know, this was the, I don't know about the original, but this building was the school site before that building opened in 1977. There was a major rehab done in 2004 when the multipurpose building was built, and then the library, or the central building, was rehabbed. This wing, which is closest to us, was built in 77, did not go through the rehab. And then the 4 portables or bungalows were brought in, I don't know when, but those are temporary structures, and those would not remain on the site. But beyond that, yeah, there was a farmhouse, as I understand it, sort of in the middle of the site, and it was it was some, I don't know what type of farm. Maybe you do.
Probably prunes. If I had to guess, it might have been prunes.
Yeah.
And I did read in one of the reports that the property, the school bought it in 1951. They didn't really do anything with it for quite a while, and it belonged to the Ghiardi family, and we all have Ghiardi Place, the little place, the house is right kind of behind us here. So that's why that was named that way. So. Anyway, now, so what I'm going to do, we'll go to the, Councilmember Knight.
Well, thank you, Mayor.
Buzzed in under the wire there.
No, thank you. I just want to say, one of the opportunities I think we've talked about certainly would be fascinating to have a potential space here is to talk about town or community history. In some of these reports, looking at photos that go back to pictures of Yountville back in the early 40s forward, to realize how much we really were just a orchard community. It's amazing. And so I think we have an opportunity to really provide a lot more history to the community. But I just had a general question in terms of, I think we're very fortunate. I appreciate all the work that the town attorney did on the sale and purchase agreement, and we're also very fortunate to have their new town managers, your knowledge and expertise from your work in National City working on projects. Maybe just briefly, in your staff report, you talked about the purchase price and the process that the town went through. I don't know if you could just go through that a little bit to talk about how we came to just generally the number that we're at now in terms of, and just to give a brief summary of that.
Yeah, well, what's written in the staff report was the purchase price for the property was determined through assessments by independent professionals, and beyond that, multiple factors, including market conditions, property assessments, were taken into consideration to establish the purchase price or fair market value. Clearly, value is an easy subject to debate, and I think when you have a site that's so unique that, you can, as you talk to real estate people, you can talk about what people call comps or comparable sales or comparable, at least listings, et cetera. It's very hard to find a comp for, 7 acres in Yountville. I think there is a 3-acre parcel that is for sale, which is probably the closest you can get to that. But I think ultimately it comes down to negotiating, in good faith, which, when I got here and I knew this was a priority, I reached out to the superintendent, and we agreed that we would negotiate in good faith together, and that it would not be through the previous process, which was the 2x2 committee. We maintained the 2x2 committee, which is 2 members of the council and 2 members of the school district board, but that was generally changed such that it was for really issues related to kids in Yountville. So, if there were transportation issues or other schooling issues for what I understand to be the 60 kids that are enrolled in Napa Valley Unified that live in Yountville, like that was the conversation where it transitioned the 2x2 committee so that, I could work with our team to negotiate what's before you today. So, again, good faith negotiations. We spent a lot of time. Happy to do my best to discuss value, but I do think the other issue that you need to really focus on in terms of the goals of the community is control. Because controlling the site gives you a lot more opportunity than just zoning or just going through a land use planning process to say what you would like to have on the site, right? So zoning only goes so far, or those types of things, where in this case, by owning the site and going through a land use process with the community, you can definitely be more specific, and you can be in control, which I think is really critical because it's such an important piece of property. And I think by controlling the site, I think you and the community, us, were in a much better position to realize the vision that the community will come up with.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so now it's time to go to the public. So you might have a comment, and that's fine. If you have questions, I'm just going to kind of keep a list of questions, and once we get the whole list, we'll kind of come back to staff or council. So if you would like to come up to the microphone, just all you need to do is state your name. You don't need to state an address anymore. That's all you need.
That's good. We have anonymity. My name is Michael Bork, and I live in town. I just want to tell you how really thrilled I am by this. I just think it's just the greatest thing you guys have done in a long time. I love the fact that there's an opportunity to get workforce housing. I understand that a lot of the money, I think about a third of the money is coming from there, and that will mandate that. So I think that's a great thing. There's been a lot of talk about that, and to be able finally to do something meaningful about that. I recognize that you don't have the money yet to build. You mentioned borrowing, and I recognize that will come up. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you how supportive I am of this and how excited I am about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, this is the kind of public comment we like to hear, so just so you know. But anyway, anything is acceptable, though. Please.
Hi, I'm Margene Marciniak. I live here in town. So, to the Mayor, Moeller, Councilman Knight, Councilwoman Tripp, and McKee, Cant, and Reeves, and our new manager, Brad, and all the staff members. I just really want to commend you and thank you all for these negotiations of the purchase of our beloved Yountville Elementary School property. I also want to thank our former town manager, Steve Rogers, and the previous council members for their fiscal responsibility and foresight that laid the groundwork to make this purchase possible. I'm very excited to learn more about your proposed interim uses and look forward to participating in these robust public engagement processes to determine the long-term future of the site. And I'm especially grateful that we have the perfect location and opportunity to build much-needed workforce and affordable housing. So again, I thank you all.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to come up? Well, I'm going to close public comment now because I'm on a roll with really great comments, so I'm not going to push my luck here. So, all right, so now we're going to come back. We've got two resolutions. Why don't we take them one at a time? First, what we'll do...
Because don't forget, we have another staff report. Cecilia's going to come up. So the second resolution is for the
For
second
just
staff
that. Okay, so
report.
we'll
One at a
just,
time.
we'll just come back with this one right now. And so this is going to be a resolution that will be approving, authorizing, and directing execution of the purchase and sale agreement to the Napa Valley School District. And you can, I think theirs will probably be a public meeting on Thursday, so you can dial in and see how they do as well. So with that, let's get a motion and a second, and then have a discussion and vote before we move on. Vice Mayor Tripp.
I just wanted to quickly clarify, because we're such a small town and rumors get going. When my comment about the state of the site wasn't to imply we were going to borrow any money. I was just making the remark that anybody who's going to invest a bunch of money in affordable housing is going to want to look at the site. Because how it gets financed, we fortunately have some sitting over there very smart people who will help figure that out. But I don't want to start a thought that we're going to have to start borrowing money. That was not the point of what I was saying.
Councilmember Reeves.
Oh, I just wanted to actually
Make a motion?
make a motion. Yeah.
And what would your motion be?
I would move approval of resolution number 24-4251, a resolution of the Town Council approving, authorizing, and directing the execution of a purchase and sale agreement with the Napa Valley Unified School District for the property known as YES in Yountville, California. And do I have to read any more of that? No.
Town
But
Attorney
also,
Solicitor.
and include a little happy dance with that.
All right, good. And Councilmember Knight.
Oh, I'm sorry, I would second
Did I
that.
see you?
I didn't push
Pop
a
up?
button, but yeah, I was getting ready to happy dance.
Okay,
too.
good.
I'll-
Would you
I'll-
like to defer to Councilmember McKee?
I'll defer. Go ahead.
Okay.
Everyone,
You're very, very kind. I am happy to second that. Really proud to second that.
Okay. Now, any further discussion from the council?
just for discussion comment, I just thought I'd like to make just a short statement. Because, I mean, it's a big project for this community. And I think it's important for us to realize it's really a golden opportunity for the community to transform kind of a unique and important parcel in the town of Yountville and provide some resident services, preserve park space, and eventually create workforce housing. I think it's fortunate because there are a few cities in California that can purchase a parcel without creating more debt. In which case, as Margene has said, I wanted to also thank and past councils and our former town manager for purposely setting aside funds for workforce housing and acquisition of this property. Past council decisions and Steve's work significantly contributed to helping finalize this project. And also want to recognize our current town manager for his knowledge and expertise, and our town attorney. Your work really finally brought this to us today, and I also am very grateful always for our dedicated town staff that are always working for the betterment of our community. So thank you all, and this is just it's just the opportunity now for us, and as the town manager said, to be able to purchase and control and have the community be involved in the process is important. That we're able to see the project come forward and make our contributions to what occurs on the property. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councilmember McKee Can't.
Just to emphasize the thanks to our past leaders and also current leaders, and I wanted to second what Councilmember Knight said to our staff. I mean, you work diligently to, whether it was finance and accounting or public works, and even touching upon Parks and Rec. I mean, it took a whole team effort to kind of put forth ideas that made this idea of purchasing the property possible. So it's a long time vision of the community. And even when we were campaigning, I mean, that was the first priority that we heard from the public is what's going on with the school, what's going on, what can we do? So that's why we all put it on the front burner of our goals, but we did not know what we were stepping into at the time. So there was a little bit of untangling that had to be maybe done first to get the right people at the table, and we're really grateful that through Brad's leadership and Gary at the helm, we got the chance to untangle and to move forward. So we were listening, and we will continue to listen as we take the next steps. Control is the statement of the day. I mean, for the town to have this parcel to be able to control usage going forward above and beyond the much needed affordable housing, this puts us in a position to not be 100% reliant on TOT in the future. And so I'm looking forward for the future of Yountville and the future councils to also be able to have this asset in their town and in their kind of control as well. This is a brilliant thing for the community having. We're so fortunate. So thank you. Wrap it up in a bow.
Councilmember Reeves.
I want to echo those statements. I just feel like this council did not undertake this purchase idea lightly. It's like any kind of outlay of a lot of resources. You have to really weigh what the benefits and the costs are. And I think a lot of community members did communicate that if the school wasn't going to be there, we should be there. So I feel like this is a huge opportunity for the community to come together and create something for ourselves on this property, and that we have control over it will allow that to happen. And I would like to just point out that you don't see any line drawings up on the monitors, because we're only looking at this purchase agreement and maybe interim uses. All of the ideas that the community wants to bring will come with fresh eyes. We're not in the back room designing anything, so I just want everyone to know that we will have ample opportunity to talk about what the needs and the wants of the community are in this process. So I just wanted to clarify a little.
All right. Thank you for that. And I just, I think I've been involved here in the council a long time, as everybody knows. This is a major milestone for Yountville. I think our last probably major milestone was our community center. There was a lot of input from the community and discussion about whether we needed one, what it was going to look like. We bought an old laundry that was over there. We didn't own a lot of that site. We had to kind of purchase that too, and a lot of community debate and input. And now we have that, and it's like it's always been there. And we're talking about how great it is and all the other stuff. So here's yet another milestone, and that I think it's just. As we said, we don't own it yet. We're very optimistic. We're all moving ahead, so it's one step at a time to kind of purchase it. But it will be something that will, again, last our community for many, many decades, and probably we'll see some changes over time, just like we have in the community center. But I just really kind of want to go back to recognizing the staff. Well, one more thing about the community center. Took once, when I first got on the council, after, we went out for lease revenue bonds, which we're still paying off, but the community center is there. We had, when I first got on the council, like $300,000 in the bank. So that was always like, a big light bulb in my head. Well, I know what I'm going to be working on. So, but it's really, I want to give the credit to the staff. The council does the budget every year, but it's the staff who spends the money. But they not only spend the money for the residents and everything in town, but they also, over a decade and a half, they've saved a lot of money. And, they've been very, very judicious on, their budget and what they absolutely needed to do and how economically they could get it done and how efficiently. And because of that, every year we had extra funds, and we call those our unassigned fund balances. And so we were able to, put those away in what I call buckets, that kind of got us here today. That really made the town very physically responsible, and just what a great place it is today. And because then the councils were prudent enough to actually put those monies away. And I have always said, I always thought the big earthquake was coming or something. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew something big was coming. And so I was very happy to support and encourage putting all that money away. And so now we have it. And I guess, and we don't have the big earthquake, so I'm very thankful for that as well. So, I just think that between, the staff and the residents giving us their input and all the councils, that, we all just need to give ourselves a big pat on the back for a job well done. So very, very excited that we're now at this new milestone. So with that,
Mayor, I just want to say thank you for your summary. But I think also what you made the case was, too, is that we are here at the same time still preserving our emergency reserves and our TOT unanticipated bucket money at the levels that the previous councils have approved. So we're taking this action with still those funds, with set-aside money for emergency reserves. And so it's I appreciate your background and summary, but we're getting here and leaving money still in buckets for...
Yeah, we're not down to that 300,000 level that I was faced with many years ago.
We've got money set aside in case of emergencies and to fund services if there was another catastrophe. So thank you.
Well done, Yountville, to everybody. So with that, we ready? Would you like a vote? I would love to vote.
The vote is now open.
All right.
And that passes unanimously.
All right. So everybody, we have now approved the contract for the purchase of this great new property. Hopefully it will be Yountville. Now it moves on to the school district. So, and with that, now we are going to, and that was unanimous. Very excited about that. We are now going to consider adoption of another resolution that will establish funds in a capital project fund 50 with an initial budget that I'm going to let our administrative director tell us about.
I'm just going to give her a quick intro because I wanted to, I guess, spread the gratitude. Thank you, first of all, for thanking us and previous administrations that led us to today. Obviously, Celia, who's going to speak here as our administrative service director, has been critical in sort of helping me through all of the buckets, since you're now using the term buckets, but we use the term fund balances and reserves, and I think it is important to note what you were all talking about, which I didn't want to steal Celia's thunder, that she's going to now go into detail about on how this is funded. But I also just want to thank, as you already did, the rest of the staff. Everyone's been really focused, and this is obviously a very big deal, and so we want to make sure we're doing the job right. So I just want to thank everyone because it is a team here, and I think we've got a great team. So I'll turn that over to our Administrative Service Director so she can talk about dollars and buckets.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Town Council. So yes, the prior agenda item was the what, and this one is the how. Staff is seeking Town Council approval of the accounting and budget-related transactions necessary to complete the purchase of the Yountville Elementary School property. And before getting into the details of the report, I was going to note the fact, which has already been mentioned several times, that the town is able to accommodate this large purchase because of the steps that were taken by this council and prior town councils over the last few years to achieve a stable financial position. 63% of the purchase price will be coming from the general fund, which has the cash ready and available in its fund balance. 27% will be coming from the Measure S fund, the Affordable Workforce and Affordable Housing Fund. And the remaining 10% will be coming from reserve funds that were built up by way of discretionary transfers in from the general fund. As the town manager mentioned previously, this staff report focuses on the $11.5 million needed for the initial phase. The initial phase requires $11 million for the purchase of the property and an allocation of $500,000 for cleanup and preparation of the site for use. The first step is for the Town Council to approve the establishment of Project CF0046 in Capital Projects Fund 50 for the purchase and development of the property in the fiscal year 23-24 budget. That's this current fiscal year. To provide the $11.5 million of funding needed for this project, staff proposes that the Town Council approve the following actions that are listed in the staff report. Release the general fund assigned for affordable housing opportunities fund balance allocation in the amount of $3,616,075 and transfer into Capital Projects Fund 50. Transfer the $3,364,000 of general fund unassigned fund balance as of the close of last fiscal year 22-23 into Capital Projects Fund 50. Transfer $900,000 from unanticipated tourism revenue deficits reserve fund 05 into Capital Projects Fund 50. Side note that using this amount will still leave a remaining balance in this fund that does meet the policy minimum of 25% of fiscal year 23-24 estimated TOT revenue. This utilization could mean that general fund transfers into this fund may be needed in the upcoming budget to ensure that the balance meets the policy minimum in future fiscal years. Next, transfer $3,019,925 from the Measure S Fund 71 into Capital Projects Fund 50. And finally, transfer $600,000 from Fleet Tools and Equipment Repair and Replacement Fund 82 into Capital Projects Fund 50. So if the use of money from this fund is approved, the Town Council could choose to replenish the fund after the close of the current fiscal year 23-24 if there is general fund unassigned fund balance to be reallocated. And that same could also be true for the use of the money from the unanticipated tourism revenue deficits reserve fund. The result of approving these transactions will be that the town will be able to purchase the school site property and complete the initial cleanup without issuing any new debt. Also, once Project CF0046 is established, we can then start planning for future projects in the upcoming biennial budget. Are there any questions of the staff report that staff can answer?
I do. To go through each one of those items that you just discussed, we can accomplish all that by passing one resolution.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So now let's see if I have any Vice Mayor Tripp questions.
So this is probably more of a question for Gary, and this is on the Measure S fund, which came about, I think, in 2018 when they added, I think it was 1% to the TOT. So we should all thank our hotels for some of this ability. So my question, Gary, is, and when I was on the Measure S, I never Is there wording that says exactly how we have to use that money? I'm guessing we're all within the law, but I was just curious. What are the parameters, and where do you look for those parameters?
So it is a 1% special tax. It's on top of the 12% general tax, TOT, that the town also receives and is part of your budget. As a special tax, it must be spent on the purposes for which it was approved by the voters. The language in the ordinance says programs and services related to affordable and workforce housing. And so that was a decision by this council and also by the voters to keep that language broad, but also still related to workforce and affordable housing. So the expenditure of those funds, because it's a special tax, it is accounted for separately in your budget and by staff, and then must be spent for programs and services on those two things.
Thank you. And that's nice that it's broad and gives us the opportunity. And then, Celia, and maybe you don't have this off the top of your head, but in general, how much a year, I'm thinking of how quickly that will get replenished. How much a year do we collect for the Measure S fund?
Measure S collects about $750,000 each year.
Okay, so the $3,019,000 is the current balance, but it will additional funds will be coming in with TOT.
Yes, that is collected monthly.
Okay, thank you.
And that Measure S doesn't have a sunset date.
Correct.
Okay.
There's no sunset, and just there is an oversight committee that you established that will actually be meeting in March 21st, I believe. So we'll go through the transaction and go through the language and make sure that it is compliant with the Measure S language.
Councilmember McKee Camp.
That sunset date may be very well what my question was. Is it time bound that once we spend funds that we need to get a shovel in the dirt?
No.
Okay. And then, so this question, it may be for Brad. Do we have insurance coverage factored into the first or the second phase?
That would probably come in a future phase.
Yeah, we've done some estimates, but obviously until we
have it
complete the
kind of
transaction,
premature.
We'll work with CIRA and other, who's the main insurance agency we work through. But yeah, that we're factoring that into the ongoing
I figured
costs.
You were.
And Celia highlighted it, but for the community, I know you know this, that we will have our first budget workshop April 16th. And so when we have our first budget workshop, we'll be able to talk more about, I guess, interim and idea, but also talk about ongoing, because there will be ongoing costs that will be within the operating budget that are, of course, the insurance, the energy, electricity, some of the other maintenance costs. So we'll be prepared to talk about that, assuming we can close the transaction on the April 16th budget workshop.
Okay, thank you.
So now I'll go to the public and see if the public has any comments. This is on where the money's, which bucket is going into and which one is coming out of, and moving the pieces around so our budget all makes sense. And any questions, comments on this one? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for.
Mayor, I have just a question
you have more comments?
Just a quick question of staff again, and I just wanted to thank Administrative Services King for your report. You are the link from starting from administrations to administration has helped us get here. I appreciate all the work that you've done. And I just want to know, we talk about a sale price of $11 million, but in this resolution we're approving 11.5, and so I would assume when you're looking at this report, when you look at the $600,000 that we're moving from Fund 82 to this new fund for equipment repair and replacement, that's really money we're setting aside for what we need to do to clean up. It's become the property would become an asset that we need to do work on, and so those funds are appropriate for whatever we'll use them for, painting or what. Is that why those funds were brought into this resolution?
If I understand your question correctly, the resolution is for 11.5 million, which includes the 11 million for the acquisition and then the 500,000 for the cleanup.
Right.
In preparation of the site.
Yeah, so it seems appropriate that we're using funds from tools, equipment, repair, replacement, because we're adding an asset and we're using funds that were set aside to, in essence, repair or do work on an asset. So it's a wise choice in terms of those funding that we can replenish in the future, but it'll help us in the short term do the work we need to do once if we finally acquire the property. So
yeah, I would say that the use of Fund 82 is more based on the fact that it was built on discretionary general fund transfers in, and
right.
So those can, if council desires, be reallocated for a separate purpose.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just add that on April 16th, and that we have a second budget workshop, but we will discuss, and leading up to that, we'll actually have another discussion on reserve policies or fund balance policies. But we get to that point and we look at the CIP and we look at our fleet and our facilities, we'll be able to come back to you with a recommendation to replenish that fund if needed. So those things will all sort of work their way through the traditional budget process, and we'll make sure we're in a good position to continue to fund those ongoing needs that come through fleet, equipment, facilities, et cetera.
I was just trying to emphasize it seems an appropriate use of that fund, moving it into this new project fund, because we will be using it for asset facility maintenance or equipment maintenance. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember McKee-Kent, would you like to make a motion?
I would like to.
Okay.
I'd like to make the motion that we adopt the adoption of resolution number 24-4252, approving establishment of project CF0046 in Capital Projects Fund 50 with an initial budget of $11.5 million.
And I'll go ahead and second that. So with that, do we have any council discussions? We see no council discussion. We're going to hit our buttons if our town clerk is ready.
The vote is now open.
It's still blinking, but I did hit it.
And that passes unanimously.
All right, just so the audience knows, now that we are moving our sales purchase together with the last motion, and now we are providing the funds to make that all happen. So thank you very much for being here and participating. And we have one more administrative item. We are going to consider adoption of a resolution that's going to approve job description and a salary range for a human resource analyst.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Very quickly, as outlined in the staff report, Town Council in actually November of 23 approved the reclassification of Celia's position from Finance Director/Treasurer to Administrative Services Director. That resulted in the department overseeing finance, human resources, and risk management. Concurrently, the town has had a vacancy in the Deputy Director of Human Resources and Information Technology position since July. And during that vacancy, Celia has been in an acting role, as well as the administrative assistant within the finance department has been in a special assignment role to fill the gap during this period of time. And so the proposed HR analyst/administrator series or job description that's before you tonight is based on the Management Analyst 1-2 series that we currently have. However, it does get into a new job description because of the specialized duties that the human resources position requires, and it clarifies the role of that position both at the entry and at the journey level. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Celia's obviously here as well, but we request your approval for this so we can continue to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Any council questions? I see Vice Mayor Tripp.
Question. I just want to thank Celia for doing the risk manager, the HR, and the finance director during this period, and so it'll be great to get more fully staffed.
So I'll go to public comment. Does anybody have any public comment on our addition of a HR analyst? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for council. Would somebody like to make a motion in a second so we can debate this item? Councilmember Knight.
Oh, thank you.
Did your button not work?
Would you like to make the motion, Councilmember?
In front of her.
I'll just go ahead and move it. I'll move resolution number 24-4253, approving job description and salary range for Human Resources Analyst, Human Resources Administrative Series. Thank you.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any council discussion on this item? I see none. So with that, we already did public comment.
On this one?
Mhm. So with that, can we hit our buttons? Is
Now
town
open.
clerk ready? Yep.
And that passes unanimously.
Okay, we just approved that one, and we just have one more item, but thanks for everyone being patient. We're going to talk about trees, but now we're going to take a break. So we're going to be back in 10 minutes. We started at 2, so just so you know, we're ready to stand up. Now we're ready for our one and only staff, but it's going to be packed full. A staff presentation and informal reports. John's going to lead us off, and he's going to introduce our town arborist, who's going to take care of the rest.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm John Ferns, your Public Works Director, and I'm going to set the stage for Tony, our town arborist, to present this report. But I want to make a quick distinction. In the town of Yountville, it really comes down to two types of trees. There's trees that are located on private property, that are on people's own individual parcels, and there are trees growing on town-owned parcels. And town-owned trees are defined in the municipal code, and those are the trees that are growing on town-owned parcels or within the town right-of-way. So the purposes of today's report is specific to town-owned trees or trees in public spaces. So quick background, as everybody is aware, we had quite a storm at the beginning of 2024. It affected trees both on public and private property, and so we're following up on the effect of the storm on trees on town-owned trees in public right-of-way. More specifically, the place that we were most effective were the redwood trees located along Hopper Creek, parallel with Heather Street, but across on the west side of the creek from Heather Street, and at the end of Oakleaf Court. And then additionally, we had public input and concern brought up about a town-owned tree on Jefferson Street at the corner of Jefferson and Adams. And the purpose of today's report from Tony is to discuss both those two areas of trees, the 15 trees that he looked at on Heather Street, and then the other Jefferson Street trees. So with that, I'll hand it off to Tony. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you hear me okay?
Yes, maybe you could just introduce yourself one more time. We have some people in the audience who may not know who you are.
Sure. So I'm Tony Walcott, the on-call arborist for the city of Yountville. And
it's a town, but that's okay.
The town of Yountville. We're working on that. Sorry. And the purpose of this, what we're going to go through looking at the PowerPoint, is to kind of give you a little bit of background of how I do assessments on trees, in particular tree risk assessment, and but as well showing some slides of the areas that John was talking about on Hopper Creek and the other one on Jefferson Street. So without further ado, let's see if we can do this. Yes. So in looking at tree assessments, there are several things that we do look at. One of them is site. So this little picture to the right happens to be along Hopper Creek and the west of Heather Street there. And it's one of the trees that I looked at. There are a total of 15 trees there that I assessed. But looking at the site, if you can see, there are places where there's impervious pavement. Also, you're close to a house. You're also close to a creek. And from my understanding is that creek goes dry in the summertime. So it's kind of riparian for half the year, and the other half it's not riparian. But that trees there, it's important to look at all the aspects of the site to give you some idea of what's going on with the tree. Also look at the history, which is also very interesting as to how the tree was pruned, or things that have changed in the history, like maybe landscaping was redone, or a grade was changed, or they put in soil, anything like that that isn't going to have some effect on the condition of the tree. Looking at weather and climate, weather is a little more shorter term. We're talking about things like, in tree risk, we commonly use the term regular weather or usual weather, in the sense that tree can withstand weather events that we normally would expect. Now, the term extreme weathers, when it's come a fashion of late, is that you end up with these extreme weather events like atmospheric rivers and stuff like that, and that pushes us into an area where we don't know exactly how the tree is going to react. And we may lose trees that we didn't think we were going to lose because of those extreme weather events, and we seem to be having more of those. Species profile just refers to the fact that every species has a history as well. We have a database called the California Tree Failure Database, or the Western Region Tree Failure Database online, and it will give us species profiles on a number of our typical species. And that profile tells us over years how many failures there have been, what kind of failures there were, so we have a fair idea of what happens to trees over time, in particular a species that we're looking at. And in today's conversation, we're only talking about redwoods. And over my span of my career, I've looked at thousands of redwoods, and there's quite a bit to tell about them. Also, we want to look at the soil and the water that's associated with the soil as well. The first thing that we discovered about 30 years ago when we started using recycled water was the first plant that bothered was redwood trees. They do not like salt in the water. And so even sometimes our domestic water has a certain amount of salt because of chlorination or fluoridation or other things that are added to the water that will cause problems for redwoods in particular. So we want to look at that. And then we look at the tree and the things to the right and going down that, the roots, the trunk, the branches. We want to be able to look at all of those things. Believe me, it's difficult to look at roots. Okay? We can't dig them up. Otherwise, we do a lot of harm to the trees. We can take a look at the scaffolding roots a little bit to see how solid they are, but it's very difficult. And I remind people, of course, when I teach, is that when you're looking at roots, the first thing you should do is look at the top of the canopy. Okay, if the canopy is lush, if it's vigorous, if it's got a nice sort of frame or canopy to it, the root system is doing its job. Okay, it's pushing enough water and nutrition all the way to the top in order for that tree to look good, healthy, in good tree condition. All right. The trunk, of course, we can see and we can take a look at it and we can sound the wood and we can do various other ways of trying to look for decay in the trunk. But that's one of the things that we look at very carefully for structural reasons. Foliage, we look at how healthy the foliage is, whether it's dense or sparse or somewhere in between, things like that. If it's struggling, we notice that as well. If we look at the overall health, and plant health care is important, we want to look at if there's any problems with the tree that are associated with health. One of those is if you've ever walked around a tree and you discovered a flat side of the tree, there's a problem there, all right? It means that part of the cambium, which produces the wood and the xylem and the phloem outside, that has been damaged, and so the tree no longer has a complete cambium going around. So those things like that are important to health. If we look at the foliage, if there's some damage, if there's some sort of signs. With redwoods, if we see little gray mold and things like that, it's a type of fungi that gets into redwood trees. So we look at the health. We also look at the structure. Redwood trees are wonderful for looking at structure because they tend to be single stem, branches spaced apart. To tell you the truth, you should never prune a redwood tree because they do an excellent job of having structure and nice distances between branches. And we find redwood trees have more problems once they're pruned. But just an opinion to this side. Sorry about that. Also, form just refers to the typical species form, and redwood has a very familiar form. Straight up, a nice little Christmas tree sort of form to it, and most of the redwood trees that I've looked at in Yountville have excellent to good form. They're in good shape that way. Then we look for defects, little problems that show up. And if you look hard enough, every tree you can find defects. Now, the fact that it has a defect doesn't mean that it's the end of the tree, but we'll look at some shortly. And then the last thing is targets. Targets being things that can be struck by the tree if it fails in some way or other. For instance, if a branch comes off of a redwood tree, are there targets that branch is going to hit? So if we look at this little picture here, yeah, it might hit the fence. It might hit a car that's parked there, possibly, and things like that. But if the whole tree fails, Okay, then we look at the height of the tree and how far it's going to fall, sometimes even adding another half if the tree is going to break up and go further. That's important as far as targets are concerned. We look at targets in various ways. Can they be moved? How frequent are they? And also, if they are going to be impacted, how severe that consequences are. So that takes care of what we look at. And here in Hopper Creek, west of Heather Street again, is tree number 13 of the 15 that I looked at. And I have my little laser, so if you can pardon the brightness of it, you can see that there. And that little area there is decayed. Yeah, sorry. So that right in there is a decayed area where I think John referred to it early in the year. We had failures there. Tree failed right next to the one that's still standing, and right next to the failed part was a whole bunch of decayed roots, and there was other failures, obviously, in the history of that tree. If we look at that as well, we see that little light there. I can see it over here as well. That's where the one stem felled and came away from the one stem that stayed. And to me, this is one of the trees that I recommend be removed because it's likely to fall within a period of time that we designate, okay? And because of the decay in the root system, it's all the same tree, so it's also going to have decay, makes it a high-risk tree. And this is tree number 4, which has a very interesting structure, meaning that it was damaged at one time and it started to grow 3 stems instead of 1. And this gives us, again, if I can use my laser, if you take a look at right there and right there where those stems are attached, we refer to that as included bark, where the stems are pushed against each other and the bark is actually gone inside the tree. It's going to cause decay. And when you get a windstorm, that decay, once it gets to a certain point, then the stem will fall off. So you're in high likelihood that this big stem is going to go towards the creek, and this one is going to go towards the house and the fence that's on the other side. So that's another tree that I think should be removed just because of those types of defects. Now we come to the very nice large tree, which is also a redwood tree, 128 feet tall, 71-inch diameter, and it's growing in a rather interesting location, right up against the asphalt of Jefferson Street, also right next to a home. There's a gravel pathway on the outside and the other side of the fence too. Things like that we look at as far as the site location. It has wires going by it, which is one of those things that we do take into consideration. A lot of things can be noticed about the location of the tree. It has a slight lean to the left. That's considered a defect as well, puts a little bit more torque or pressure on the base of the tree. It has been pruned up, meaning that from here up, the branches have been taken off, partially to clear them over the wires, just so that it's kind of a balanced looking tree. That changes a little bit of the dynamics when winds do blow, but this is one that I looked at carefully because it is a large tree and it also is in a residential area. So targets are many. People walking by, cars driving by, also the homes and the people living in the homes, frequent occupation, and certainly parked cars would be targets as well. There are a lot of targets there, so we want to make sure that we've looked at this tree very carefully. And here are 4 little slides about the Jefferson tree that are interesting. The one on the top left-hand corner there, oops, sorry, wrong tool. So if we look at that, that gives us an idea just of the base of the trunk and how it's situated and also situated with the road itself. The asphalt, again, we look at as being impermeable, so water runs off of it. and it also covers up a fair portion of the redwood root system. And when it covers that, it just sort of it affects the amount of exchange, of gas exchange between the roots and the environment, which is important to a tree. Now, this tree probably did not have, for most of its life, asphalt covering. Probably that was a roadway of some sort, so it would have been compacted soil, but still, that's one thing to note. And then right below that, we have the bottom of the tree where the bark is basically lifting its way up. The explanation for that is that the grade has been changed historically over time, and when it changes, it causes different differentiation of tissue on the tree, and the bark is transitioning to the root system, and we now kind of see that right now. And we see how we have a differentiation between the big bark and then the bark that's underneath it. Keep in mind that redwood trees have three different types of bark, from the outside to the middle to the inside. It's one reason why they survive fire so well, is because they have a very thick bark. And so it's not so unusual to look at that. That's really not a big problem or a big defect. And then on the right-hand side, that doesn't even look very good. Sorry, that slide didn't come out very well. Odd. Again, this is the other side of the trunk up against the roadway. And I would advise at least taking a little bit of that asphalt out if the tree remains, just to give it so it's not pushing up against the asphalt too much. There's even in this part, you can't see it maybe a little bit, but there is a crack that extends all the way through to the other side of the road. And over each year, those roots are going to get a little bit bigger, and those cracks are going to get a little bit larger. So that's one thing to consider as well. Many of you may know what these little red things are, but the concern was, was the tree moving? And so there was three red little prisms that a survey company put up there, used a couple of monuments or places where they could take sightings from, and each year or each half year for a while there, they were measuring any kind of movement. And basically the answer is that very, very little movement within the range of air as far as the equipment goes. And then the last one had a little bit of a bigger range than was kind of an anomaly, where that lower one that we're looking at, its elevation had changed. And there was sort of, is the tree going? But if you look at the information, that elevation change said that the tree, that little red thing got taller. The only way that it can go taller, if it's leaning like this and it's right here, the only way it gets taller is if it goes the other direction, goes backwards. Okay, so that's, again, I think, just an anomaly. Basically, all of those measurements have been taken. Yes, Brad? No. Since 2022, that we've been taking these measurements, and the last measurement, reinforces the fact that the tree's pretty darn stable. Okay, at this point. All right. Now, my tools that I use, just quickly, it shouldn't be unusual to you, but binoculars, a small trowel, a shovel, sounding hammer, clippers, rangefinder, which is very handy for measuring distances and also heights of trees, hand microscope, a hand lens, soil probe, tree calipers for measuring diameter tape, measuring tape, and also camera, pocket knife. I also have a little thing for sticking in the dirt, which tells me what the soil pH is and what the nutrients are, the major nutrients, and razor blades and sampling bags for testing if we want to take something to a lab. Get through that quickly. Tree risk assessment has a form to it, two sides of the sheet or two sheets. This one is the basic tree risk assessment form, the level 2 that we're talking about. It's more or less just a punch list to make sure that you've looked at everything and you haven't forgotten this or that. The next page is on the back side or a second sheet, and this part shows the matrix for figuring out the tree risk rating, and it basically deals with the likelihood that a tree part will fail, and if it fails, what's the likelihood that it's going to impact something, a target, and if it impacts the target, what's the consequence of that impact? All right, its consequence could be severe all the way down to negligible. All right, so if you look at the Jefferson redwood, if the whole tree were to fail, what would be the likelihood that it would hit a target? So it's 128 feet tall. It's going to hit something. Okay, all right. It probably will hit even more than one thing, fences, cars, and possibly houses that are on the other side or even on the same side of the tree. So we have those kind of things that we need to look at and the likelihood. One important thing about tree risk that I wanted to stress to people, we have to have a time frame, meaning that we say over the next 5 years, over the next 3 years, over the next year. Even you can go down, and this we've done this several times in tree risk, you can say over the next month, and then after that you reassess it. Maybe you get more information or something like that, and you can make a better informed decision. So that's one. The tree risk, the time frame is just very important because you have to have some sort of set time frame to limit what your observations are about before you go back and look at it. And oftentimes, even if it's a 5-year time frame, you still can go back every year or every 6 months to look at it. And heaven forbid there's a extreme weather event, you're going to want to reevaluate it right away. So that kind of comes with the tree of risk. You must have a time frame. The targets are identified. Oh, I didn't speak about this a little before, but tree species identified. It's easy for us on redwood trees, though I did have one town of Yountville neighbor come up to me and insist that he had a giant sequoia, that he wasn't a redwood tree. I had to tell him that he was wrong, but I don't think he believed me. All trees will fail eventually. We know that. Okay, so we just have to get to a point where we get beyond our risk, our threshold risk, and then the tree would be removed. If you didn't remove it, sooner or later it's going to fall. Now, all trees carry some risk. If it's out in the forest and there's nobody around, the tree may fall, and I don't think anybody's going to care, all right? It's part of the natural process, all right? But if it's close to things and it has targets, we want to make sure, have some kind of insurance that the tree will stand for a certain period of time. There are no guarantees, okay? Tell everybody this, that despite what I say, the tree may fall tonight or tomorrow. Okay, we don't know. We're not that. Our knowledge is not so unbounded that we can make those kind of predictions. So there's always a tree risk threshold. My job as a tree risk assessor is to give the information to whomever or to whatever group is going to make the decision as to what their threshold is, their risk threshold. One last thing, risk mitigation, meaning that there are things that can be done to mitigate the risk to make it a little more safe, but a little less risky. And a good example is that we've had instances, Brad told me about when he was out there where a large branch came off the redwood tree. What's a large branch? 3-inch diameter, a little over 3-inch diameter or larger. And the fact that if it's falling from a height it gains momentum as it comes down, it could be dangerous, right? So to mitigate that, every year you would have a arborist go through the tree and remove any branches that are cracked or poorly attached, and even branches which are hanging there, we refer to them as hangers, will sooner or later come down. If all of that gets cleaned up every year, you reduce significantly the risk of tree branch failures. Okay? Oh, last but not least, what are tree benefits? All of this talk about tree risk and everything, we really tend to forget that trees are fairly important to us. And I can list 100 of them, but I won't bore you that much. But keep in mind that the fact that we're able to breathe is because of trees and plants. They provide us with oxygen. They don't need us. They need just the carbon dioxide and oxygen in the air, and we certainly need them. So that's a huge benefit. They also gather or they take rainfall in their leaves. They prevent erosion. More than anything else, they also give us a sense of nature, and we've had hundreds of studies these days about the benefits to society or to people around trees, better health, better life quality, and things like that. Shade, yeah, all of those things. There's just so many things that trees provide, including all of the building that we do, and a lot of the food that we have comes from trees. The story about myself is that I started about when I was 18 years old, started eating out of a wooden bowl. And it came from a Northern California not black walnut, but a Northern California walnut tree. And I kept that bowl for about 12 years. And then when I was working in the city of Albany, in the city of Berkeley, there was a big red oak that came over and fell on a house. It fell about 5 feet, and it did $25 worth of damage on the gutter. And so it wasn't a big problem. But we were able to cut up the tree and make bowls out of it. And one of those bowls I still have today, and that's what I eat my cereal out of every day. And I think that's a very important thing. That if you get to the point where you remove this Jefferson redwood, I think that you should utilize every bit of that wood for slabs, for bars, or for businesses, for bowls, for whatever you want. There's just a whole lot of good material there, and that's another way of taking advantage of carbon sequestration, is that it still sequesters the carbon if you do it as an art thing, like as opposed to grinding it up and putting it out as mulch. Okay, now I tried to get through that relatively quickly and hopefully haven't bored you people at all, but questions?
Just a couple comments before you get to questions. And John, I don't know if there was anything you had to follow up on. I just want to, first of all, be clear, this is a staff informational report, so we're not asking you to vote. Obviously, we want to hear the discussion or any ideas you have. I will tell you, we have been meeting with Tony as it relates to updating our tree ordinance. That will come in due time as we kind of phase that and talk about that. But currently, there's nothing in the ordinance that talks about how these decisions get made about public trees. There's conversation about it on the private side, of course, on tree removal permits, et cetera. We have, as I understand through Gary, as a past practice, talked about using that process, if you will, for public trees. So that clearly is something you've done in the past, and I know you've made, or the town has made great efforts to preserve trees. I think the one on Hopper Creek is the one example people talk about. But I will tell you, at least from my position as the person who has to at least guide you or try to make some of these decisions, that, I read through Tony's report. I've been very interested to learn a lot about trees. I have to say, that's one of the byproducts of coming here that's been pretty fascinating to me. But I trust the report, and I do think you get into really this question of assessing or managing risk. And the fact that he is, in his assessment, determining this to be a low-risk tree, for me, that's the driving point on what I would advise you. And I think, I do think that trees obviously are important to the point of all the benefits and obviously the aesthetic beauty and all of the things that everyone recognizes. We can talk about it through the ordinance if you would want to talk about process change, but I would probably advise you that at this point we have a good process, and since we have a town arborist whose expertise, I think, is helping this conversation. I think this is a good informational report. But if you did want me to, talk about process and bring something back, we could do that. I just think I'm trying to phase that through what Tony has advised us in terms of how we should approach the ordinance. So I don't know. I would hate to sort of, just accelerate things that maybe are not priorities at this point, because I do know the man has a plan. We're working through it. It's just a matter of how do we sequence it and how do we pay for it, because I think the last thing I wanted to say is, for those that didn't know, in the consent agenda, you did approve the budget amount that allows for us or for John to contract to remove the 5 trees that he's recommending along Hopper Creek. So we are prepared to move forward. You have budgeted for that, again, based on the recommendation of your arborist. So I think these things are always somewhat dependent on the priorities, like at most things. And at this point, I feel like the recommendations are solid, and I'm prepared to stand behind them, unless you direct me otherwise. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
We've got a couple lights on, so we do have some questions. I'm not sure if they're for Tony or Brad, but Councilmember Reeves.
I just wanted to indicate that I am really grateful that we hired you to be our consultant, because this is the kind of information that has been lacking for our town. We have traditionally been very pro-tree to the extent that we have engaged in litigation about trees. So I think there is a bit of support for making sure that we walk the line of what you're talking about, mitigating issues with trees, making sure that the trees are viable, and making sure that if it's a threat that is supported by your risk assessment, that we take care of it to protect everyone. But I really do appreciate the idea that we need to make sure that we don't address just particular issues now, but that we wait for the whole package to come back about trees and adding to our heritage tree list other species other than oaks, and make sure that we protect and come up with a game plan for those trees we think are significant and important, so that we can maintain them and make sure that they last for as long as we can, as long as it's possible for them to last. And then just for my point of view from your report, I really would like us to take some mitigation measures for the Jefferson Street tree, including taking out some asphalt. And I think Jefferson Street is a really wide street in town and could use a little bit of traffic mitigation, actually. So if we wanted to bulb out some portion of that to give it more breathing space, I would definitely support that. And I think possibly doing a drone study, I don't know how much that costs, but we have in the past spent money on trees, so we need to find out what that would look like. And I don't know if you've already figured that out.
No, it's sort of in the process, because you're talking about a level 3 assessment, which involves some rather expensive scientific tools, and there are people who do that, and I know them, so I've contacted them, and they'll get back to me with some sort of idea of what the cost would be and what we would get out of it.
Vice Mayor Tripp.
I had 2 questions. I took your point very well that all trees are going to eventually fall. But for this kind of tree, what would its anticipated lifespan be? The redwood on Jefferson. So I hear it's 100 years old. I have no idea how old these trees live to be.
Yeah, approximately 120 years old would be my estimate as to how old it is. It can live quite a bit longer than that. If we look at the Humboldt redwoods that get so large, we're talking about 500, 700, 900, 1,000 years old. All right. That's not going to be the case with redwoods that are sort of out of their preferred area. I didn't say too much about it, but redwoods thrive on fog. All right, and if you don't have fog, they're not going to be happy. They do need. They're also not drought tolerant. They like water. And one thing that Yountville has sometimes in some areas, and I think the Jefferson redwood is an example of this. There's water down there, either with with natural drainage and underground rivers or the water table. In my report, I made the comment that I was walking around every 5 minutes, a sump pump went on and kicked water out onto the surface. And I go, wow, it just looks like somebody's watering the tree.
You concluded that this tree has excellent health, so 96%. You put it in health-wise. How many trees of this size and age do you see that? Because that sounds really healthy. 96, right?
Right.
Is that unusual? It sounds unusual.
Well, you kind of have to define usual a little bit, but a lot of not a lot, but probably about half of the redwoods I look at are pretty healthy. And they're usually healthy because there's a water supply of some sort for them.
And is that probably the most important element to determining the risk of the tree, is the health of the tree?
No.
In terms of poor outcomes?
Put health and structure together. Those are the two things. And they overlap sometimes. Sometimes you get accused of double dipping when you look at, say, oh, the trunk is unhealthy. And then you turn around and say, oh, the trunk is risky because it doesn't have any cambium on that side. But the two kind of go together. Structure is just the ability of the tree to hold itself up.
So the fact that roots are covered by asphalt, in general, and this is really a beginner understanding, but I think of the roots as sort of being the stability factor for something that tall. Were you hampered at all by the asphalt, or do you actually have any ways of looking at the root structure to see how firmly anchored it is?
It's difficult because, again, we can't dig up the roots, but we can take a look at the scaffolding the scaffolding roots that come down and come out, and take a look at how solid the wood is. And I mentioned before that if the canopy is healthy and with foliage and stuff, the root system is functioning as far as producing that material, but it also is functioning as far as structurally holding the tree up. Yeah.
And then my final question, because I do kind of agree with Pam that it might be appropriate here to go with level 3, I think it is. Do they look, I think it says something that implied perhaps there are ways to look at the roots without digging them up. Is that part of level 3?
If you ask for it and you find somebody who does it, yes. The difficulty with that one is we're talking about, it's sometimes called root radar, and it's a type of X-ray machine that they roll along the ground. So it's not invasive at all, but it can figure out where the roots are. It's quite amazing, actually, and but it's an expensive process.
And my final question: if this whole tree was to fall over, not branches, what would the source of the failure be? Would it be a failure of the roots to hold it up in a high wind event, or I guess the trunk could break, but what yeah.
It's a good question because it oftentimes, first of all, there's usually more than one cause. It's really folly for us to say, oh, that caused it. But it was a combination of things. Much of our redwood failures in 23, where we had several atmospheric rivers and stuff, there were a lot of redwoods that fell over, which is unusual. But the reason is that the soil was saturated. And so the roots didn't have anything to hold on to. It was liquid. And so with any kind of pressure, high winds and stuff like that, it was enough that the roots were broken on one side and the tree went down. That was a big reason for a lot of those failures. But there, again, it would have to be high winds that put the force on. The roots themselves may have been somewhat, there may have been a problem down there as far as root problems go. We don't know exactly. But when that root ball comes up, it's pretty amazing how big they are.
And then just finally, your report was really excellent, and I'm delighted to have you on board. And thank you. I think it was Pam who originated this idea of a tree arborist, town arborist. So thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Councilmember Knight.
Mr. Wolcott, for your report. Whether it's this tree or other trees in the community, at some point we're addressing issues of, from residents and the challenge is, how do we become fully informed to make that decision? So you did a level 2. Could you just talk to us a little bit about what a level 3 would be and how that would inform the council, if that would provide more information than from what your assessment you've already done?
Yes, a level 3 is going to utilize tools that look at wood decay, and there's a couple of tools. One's a resistograph, where it's a small little blade that goes through the trunk of the tree, and it registers resistance. So if it comes to an open cavity, for instance, there's no resistance at all. So, and then it prints out on a computer graph at the same time, and so you can tell how much decay or how many voids are in the trunk and what the wood stability is like. And then so that's one thing that what I do is I have a sounding hammer. It's a special type of hammer, and I tap on and I listen to the sound. Not nearly as reliable as a resistograph or a tomograph. A tomograph is non-invasive entirely, but they put sensors all the way around the trunk of the tree, and they measure sound waves going through the tree, and it gives you a fairly accurate idea of how much decay is in the trunk. So you would get that information. My experience with the redwood and tapping it and stuff like that is that it's solid. From that point of view. But if you really want to know, then you get a resistograph or a tomograph out to do that. The other thing that you do with a level 3 is that you have a climber or you use a drone to thoroughly inspect the canopy. Because I look at it with binoculars, but it's difficult for me to look at the attachments, see if there's any cracks or anything like that where you can, prevent. And this is again what Pam was talking about, mitigating, is that you can mitigate that risk by going up there and removing those branches that are in danger of cracking or coming down, and remove the hangers, stuff like that. So level 3 gives you the canopy inspection, the wood inspection, not only that wood of the trunk, but also the scaffold roots to make sure that they're solid. And then if you do get the ground detecting radar for the root system, then you can find out where the root system is. So again, not all level 3 people are equivalent. Some have more of the fancy equipment. Not many people have the ground detecting radar.
So when we look at a tree like this one, where you talked about how coastal redwoods are typically more in the coastal area with fog and maybe in groves. How do we assess a tree that's sole standing and not in a grove of trees? Does that increase any risk if we're trying to be more fully informed about a tree that's standing alone for a coastal redwood? Is it
Well, I think you're right in the sense that if you're looking at a grove of redwoods, that there's advantages to having more trees, partly because they're able to share their own with their root systems. They can exchange nutrients and things like that, but they also interweave with each other, make it a much stronger sort of structural situation too. Now, you can have too close or too many redwood trees, which kind of negates that. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. But when you have a tree that's out in the open, now the thing that is interesting about that is that this tree didn't used to be by itself. There were 2 large Douglas fir trees that were apparently removed some time ago, and you can tell that there were big trees around that redwood tree. Otherwise, you wouldn't get that lean. Okay, the redwood trees and a lot of your conifers, they typically, when they start growing, it doesn't matter that genetically they're disposed to go up to the light, because whoever wins that race ends up being the dominant tree and gets all of the benefits of the light. So if you have the big Douglas fir here and the redwood here, this redwood would have been pushed by the Douglas fir to go towards the light. And then as it comes up and it gets above the Douglas fir, it corrects its lean, which is exactly what it has done. Makes it more of a balanced tree, even though it looks like it's leaning. And it is leaning at parts, but it has corrected that lean up on the upper part.
Good, thank you. So just generally in terms of, for the council to be fully informed, what do you recommend in the short term or short term year, 5 year to continue to assess this tree?
First, I think that annually it has to be inspected from a tree risk point of view and looked at everything that I looked at. If we do that annually, that would be, I think, sufficient for for keeping a responsible look on it. There's no guarantee with it, and then as I said before, if there is some extreme weather, you want to look at it right away. Those things are important. And if anything else is noticed, you just kind of want to keep your eye on it. But you should keep your eye on a lot of trees in the town. But so I think that all of those things would be wise to do. And I had mentioned earlier too, if you wanted to make the time frame shorter, you could certainly make it so that you had more hands-on observation of that redwood tree. That would be helpful as well.
Thank you,
Councilmember McKee-Can.
I have questions, but first I'll answer one of yours. If a tree falls and nobody's around, you do hear it. I've lived on the mountain. You do hear it from a distance. And I did hear one of the trees fall in the lagoon, and it was the water. It was loud. So just to put that factor to rest. But you had said earlier that you shouldn't prune redwoods, that can actually do harm for them. But wouldn't mitigation efforts, in essence, be pruning it?
Yes, because in a sense, you're pruning off branches that are
potential widowmakers?
Yeah, widowmakers, if you will. But that kind of pruning is very selective, and it's not the sort of pruning that I see on redwoods all the time. I see people pruning redwoods where they thin out half the branches and make it look beautiful. You can see the trunk now and stuff like that. That's really harmful to the redwood tree. And it takes the redwood about 4 to 5 years before it can come back and look like itself. And sometimes it doesn't even make it back. Right. So that's the kind of pruning that I sort of don't like. This redwood on Jefferson has been pruned in the sense that there's been a little bit of reducing the canopy on the way up, so it doesn't go too far out. And that's also okay for redwoods. Certainly you don't want to do that on a pine, but.
What about the wires going through are those power lines?
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, is some pruning needed for the power lines?
It's a good idea to keep them. If PG&E does not do line clearing when it's just. I agree. But even with these types of power lines, which are service lines for the houses and stuff, they don't do anything with that anyways. But you do want to be careful that you don't have branches coming down on the wires that would possibly bring them down. And so some kind of pruning to kind of window the wires a little bit if it gets to that. Right now, it's okay the way it's set up.
So town would want to keep an eye on that. You had said to gauge the roots, even though you can't see through the soil, look at the top of the canopy. One of the comments, and it might have been in a letter, and I was trying to see if it was in your report, was there the top of the tree is gone, basically, and so it's kind of creating a second top, if you will. What does that tell you?
It tells me that the redwood tree is getting to the point where it's not going to get much taller. Okay, if it gets any taller, the root system is not going to be able to push water up that high. So what you're talking about was in a letter. I wasn't aware of it until yesterday when I read some of the comments. And that happens with redwoods commonly, is that all of a sudden you look at the top and you go, it's not looking very good. It's getting sparse, and eventually the top comes out and falls, right? So that's one of those things that you can mitigate by going up there. If you see something that's dead or dying and things like that, you can do some pruning on the top. But the other thing is that redwood trees, typically if the top comes out, another branch or off the adventitious buds on the trunk will take over, and you end up with sometimes one, sometimes two or three main stems going up.
Going for that light. Is the asphalt, in essence, anchoring the tree at all?
No.
Okay. And last question, my real last question. What wind speed, summer temperatures, and rainfall amounts comprise extreme weather?
I don't know the answer to that.
I know. I mean,
I don't think
that we had at the start of the year was extreme, and the wind was coming from a different direction, so hence a lot of trees fell.
Right.
But if we're watching for extreme weather, I was just wondering if there were any benchmarks that we needed to.
There really aren't. My experience with it, when we started hearing about atmospheric rivers, is it became a catchword for weather people on TV. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be an atmospheric river tomorrow, and you kind of go, where is it, But I don't know the answer to that, because the other thing is that what you said is very true about trees. If you get wind from an odd direction, then trees are going to sometimes topple because they're not used to that force coming in that direction, and that's an important distinction. And it's a very common thing when you have an odd wind. And I tell people that these trees that we're talking about, the redwoods and almost all the trees, historically, long before Homo saps came along, did just fine. Okay, they had wonderful big trees. The species profile of a redwood is to have branches that go all the way down to the ground. They drop a whole bunch of detritus, and that improves the soil below their branches, and they're just perfectly happy. But if we lift up the skirt, so to speak, if we prune to the side, if we take off the top, we're doing that not because of the tree, not for tree health. We're doing that for human reasons.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Councilmember Reeves,
Thank
last
you.
question.
Actually, Robin asked that question. I was going to ask about an answer to Mr. Lilienthal's assertion that the top had already come out. So you don't think that really is an indicator of poor health? It's just what happens when they stop growing taller?
Right. It's a limit on how much pressure the roots can insert on the water to push them up. And it's very common for us. We in the Bay Area along the coast there, where redwoods sometimes are pretty happy. They only get so high before the wind comes over and basically dries out the tops, and the root system can't keep up with it. So.
And Town Clerk, did we get any public comment on this item?
All comments that we did receive have been forwarded to council. Nothing in addition.
Okay, and I'm just going to take public comment because we've got some bodies sitting back there. If you've got some questions, just add. You can bring those up, and after we take all the questions, we can answer them. So if you'd like to come up and address the council. We don't usually take these, but today we will.
Okay. My name's Carla Reif, and I just wanted to give some unscientific observations about the trees in our town. 3 incidents that I'm familiar with, which may be in the report, I didn't see the report, was one that happened on Hopper Creek near where Thomas Keller lives a few years ago. There was a woman sitting in her house, and the tree on Hopper Creek fell into her house, not in the part of the house that she was sitting in, but to the other part of the house, and it was very traumatic, expensive, and she was not happy about it. Anyway, it took a long time to get that house fixed. Then there was some extensive, on April 1st, 2014, on the south side of the cemetery, there was another tree that fell on this lady's home, and she happened to be in the other room, didn't get hurt, but there was, it was very devastating, it was expensive, and a lot of damage. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was a neighbor of Mr. Ralston's here had come to me and asked me to help her write a letter to the council about some trees that the town owned that were abutting her property that seemed to need some attention. And I started to write the letter, and it got confusing. I said, "Oh, you live right next door to him. Why don't you ask him what to do about it?" And I think she did, and I think you came over and looked at it, et cetera. Well, a couple of days later, the tree fell and grazed the side of her house, apparently to her. So I think this is a safety of residents issue as well that you need to look at pretty carefully. That's it.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the public like to come up?
Margine Marciniak, yes. We had a beautiful 100-year-old oak tree fall on our home almost 10 years ago to the day. It was a town tree, and it was extensive damage. We were out of our home for, I think, 9 months for repairs. We missed that tree. What I really want to say is we learned a lot in the process, and I came and spoke to the council about it when we learned that it's our insurance, your personal insurance, that covers that damage. It's not the town, it is your personal insurance. Our claim was about $100,000 or $300,000. It was huge. Fortunately, we were very well insured. I could talk more about that. I could dig out the letter. I tried to educate my neighbors, the public, about that detail. Sharon did not publish my letter in the Sun because Steve Rogers asked her not to. So I think it's an important point. And no, you don't have X-ray vision. We have expertise. We love trees. We don't want you to take out any more than you need to. Yes, they're going to fall someday. Fortunately, no one was hurt. But there's also a financial issue, and it's not on the town. At least it wasn't in ours, unless something's changed, but I don't think so. So it's just something that I want to mention to y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come? Because this is almost a wrap. I'm going to ask for a resolution for adjournment here. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Staff, a lot of great information today. Councilman Reif, last statement?
Not a statement. I just wanted to ask if in a future agenda, if staff could give us information about responsibility and insurance and things like that when trees do fail, that are in our public right-of-way and they are town trees, basically, and what that looks like.
I'd say two things. One, we are going to come back through Tony on a process to look at the ordinance so we can generally talk about risk, but I would advise you that it's probably best that, Gary provide a memo or some form of it sounds like you're sort of looking for kind of the legal liability question, and I think that's probably a better question for Gary to answer. I mean, as we've discussed, there's risk with all trees. The key is for the town to act appropriately and obviously address issues when they're brought to our attention so that we're not negligent. And I think that's obviously happening here today. And I think will continue to happen as, issues are brought up. But I do think it's a little hard to talk about risk or legal liability in a public forum. So I would just, ask Gary to kind of chime in on that, however you see fit.
Sure, yeah. So I think a separate memo to the council probably makes sense if that's something you all would like, and then we can discuss at that point maybe how that information might go more broadly.
So,
Mayor, I just one question. What I heard in terms of the discussion from council members was a request to find out more information in terms of the council being more fully informed about the costs of a level 3 and what recommendations our town arborist has for regular maintenance of any large tree in town. So I'm hoping that type of information will come back sooner, soon, so that we can make some judgment, and somehow respond to what we have from neighbors that have concerns. So, thank you.
So we have council external meetings, but I've got a long list, and I think I'll hold them till next time. Does anybody else have any critical meeting updates they need? Okay, with that, can we get a motion for adjournment?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
Let's try that again. Okay, whoever gets there first.
Go ahead, Eric.
I'm sorry, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. What can we just do? All in favor? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? I'm going to give Alan Chensher the gold star for being in the audience the longest today.
Oh,
so,
man.
yeah.
No longer.